The arrogant chief engineer sneered at the black female mechanic. "If you can fix this engine, I'll marry you, and I'll sign you to a $300,000 a year contract." That insulting challenge rang through the company's warehouse like a gunshot, tearing apart the tense silence of that morning. A gloomy Monday morning shrouded Precision Automotive's sprawling industrial complex in Detroit, the beating heart of America's auto industry. The atmosphere inside the main warehouse was especially strained, a stark contrast to its usual hustle and bustle. The pale glow of neon lights cast sharp shadows across the room, illuminating the cold, hard set of the man standing before the gathered crowd. Richard Williams, this company's all-powerful chief engineer, strode forward in a sleek gray blazer, his arrogant gaze sweeping over the dozens of engineers and staff waiting tensely. Renowned as a technical genius with a glittering resume of successes, Richard also had a reputation for contempt. He looked down on anyone who lacked an Ivy League degree or a prestigious pedigree. Today, he decided to give the one woman he despised a lesson in humility, Diana Harris. Diana Harris stood quietly in a corner of the warehouse, the only black female mechanic among the top engineers. She didn't have MIT or Stanford diplomas like her male colleagues. What she possessed was a modest garage on Detroit's South Side, and two calloused hands honed by years of relentless work. Yet, word of her talent spread through the city's underserved neighborhoods, where people revered Diana as a wizard who could resurrect machines others had declared beyond repair. Richard approached her with a half-smile of disdain, phone in hand, recording every moment for the company's internal network. "Ladies and gentlemen," he announced loudly, ensuring every ear in the warehouse caught his words. "Today, we have a very special guest. It's my honor to introduce Diana Harris, the woman the folks in her neighborhood call a mechanical genius." Laughter rippled through the crowd. Diana squared her shoulders, her face calm, though her heart pounded inside her chest. Richard's tone turned venomous. "She believes she can fix our newest experimental engine, something our top engineers already gave up on. Admirable, isn't it?" His sarcasm echoed off the high ceilings, diners focusing their eyes on Diana. The engine in question was part of a top-secret project, promising to boost electric vehicle efficiency by up to 60%. But after 3 weeks, Richard's elite team conceded defeat, costing the company $200,000. Enraged by the failure and stung by an off-hand remark that even Diana Harris might pull it off, he seized the opportunity to humiliate her. Raising his phone closer, Richard's eyes glittered with challenge. "So, here's my formal declaration. If Miss Harris can repair this engine within 5 days, something our finest engineers couldn't manage in 3 weeks, I'll do 2 things immediately. First, I'll sign her to a $300,000 a year consulting contract. And second," he paused, his smirk widening, "I'll marry her." A roar of laughter exploded around the warehouse at his insulting pronouncement. All eyes swung to Diana, awaiting her reaction. In that moment, the entire space fell into a terrifying hush. Diana stood her ground, looking Richard in the eye without a flicker of fear. Memories, painful and personal, surfaced. Her late husband, killed in a car crash years ago. The nights she'd stayed awake, cradling her sick daughter Jasmine. She knew she had to accept this challenge, not just for her own pride, but for her daughter's future. Richard pressed the phone even closer, his voice mocking. "Well, Miss Harris, do you dare accept my challenge?" Diana drew in a measured breath. Determination shone through her quiet voice as she replied, "I accept." Those 2 words struck the warehouse like thunder. Conversations erupted, some skeptical, some sympathetic, while Richard chuckled coldly, sure she would fail spectacularly in front of everyone. But Diana knew her own skill. She was used to overcoming impossible odds. The hushed whispers and ridicule only fueled her resolve, igniting a fierce determination in her heart. Richard ended his recording, turned to Diana one last time and sneered, "Good luck, Diana. I look forward to seeing your miracle." He walked away, leaving her standing amid dozens of doubtful stares. But Diana no longer cared about their doubts or their jeers. In that defining moment, she made a promise. She would prove that true miracles don't come from degrees or social standing, but from courageous hearts and hands willing to conquer the impossible. Richard turned and walked away, but the smug smile on his face lingered in Diana's mind. Richard's phone screen was still lit, streaming the brief clip of Diana accepting his insulting challenge. It didn't take long before that video showed up on every internal Precision Automotive feed and spread through the company like wildfire. Less than an hour later, every smartphone and monitor in each department displayed Diana Harris's determined, slightly tense face as she agreed to the chief engineer's dare. Comments poured in like a flash flood. At first, just curious whispers, then venomous mockery and scorn. Upstairs in his plush leather chair, Richard reclined comfortably, watching the reactions roll in. He savored each mocking remark, seeing in them proof of his untouchable power and position at Precision. Richard didn't hate Diana personally. To him, she was simply a symbol of what he despised most. People who believed they could succeed through raw talent and hard work rather than coveted university degrees. Born into a wealthy family with a 3-generation legacy of elite engineers, Richard grew up convinced that diplomas, social standing, and respect were the birthright of formally trained professionals. In his worldview, people like Diana Harris didn't belong in high-tech engineering circles, and their very presence devalued everything he stood for. Scrolling through the comments, Richard chuckled at the cruel jabs. Does she think that's a sewing machine? Hope Diana even knows how to read an engineering diagram. He smiled coldly, certain that in just a few days Diana's failure would be laid bare before the entire company, and then everyone would fear and revere his status even more, never daring to question the talent of their engineering head again. Meanwhile, down in the workshop below, Diana stood silently amid the non-stop whispering of her colleagues. She didn't need to check her phone to know the video was everywhere. The looks being cast her way had shifted from mere curiosity to blatant contempt. A few people walking past even pretended to stifle laughter, treating her like a punchline. Worst of all, Diana knew the insults wouldn't stop with her. Hours after the video went live, her 16-year-old daughter, Jasmine, a sensitive high school junior, started receiving hateful messages from classmates. Jasmine had kept quiet at first, but when she came home, her beautiful face was swollen and streaked with tears. As Diana opened the door, she found Jasmine sitting motionless on the sofa, eyes fixed on her phone. "Mom," Jasmine choked out, her voice trembling with emotion. Diana rushed to her side and pulled her into a hug, her heart tightening when she saw the stream of mocking comments and the link to Richard's video on the screen. "I'm sorry, Mom, but they say you'll never do it. They say you're just a poor mechanic pretending to be good." Jasmine wept, her small hands clutching her mother's shirt. Diana was momentarily stunned by pain and anger. Ever since her husband died, she'd held on to her strength, refusing to let anyone see her vulnerability. But faced with her daughter's tears, she felt all her sacrifices teetering on the brink of being undone by a cruel prank. Yet Diana knew she couldn't let emotion override reason. She gently brushed Jasmine's hair aside and whispered, "Jasmine, I know this is hard, but you have to believe in me. People judging us only see the surface. They don't know what we've been through, and they don't know the real strength we carry inside." Looking into her daughter's tear-filled eyes, Diana spoke with unwavering resolve. "I promise you, I will prove everyone wrong. No one has the right to look down on us. Do you believe me?" Jasmine nodded, her eyes still red. Diana held her daughter tight, silently vowing to do whatever it took to protect Jasmine, so her girl would never endure something like this again. Later, when Jasmine finally fell into a deep, exhausted sleep, Diana slipped quietly out of her room and onto the small balcony overlooking the faint city lights. In the stillness of the night, she wondered, could she really achieve the impossible? Then the image of Jasmine's trusting face flashed before her. She knew she had no other choice. She would fight not just for herself, but for Jasmine, and for everyone who'd ever been looked down upon by those convinced of their own superiority. In the darkness, Diana's calloused hands clenched into fists. Whispering to herself, quiet but fierce, she vowed, "All right, Richard. If you want a war, I'm ready to fight to the end." In the stillness of night on her small balcony, Diana's gaze lingered on the distant lights of downtown Detroit, but her mind drifted back to haunting memories. The moment she held Jasmine and saw her daughter's anguish over cruel teasing from classmates felt like an invisible blade tearing open an old wound Diana had buried deep for years. 7 years earlier, on a bitterly cold, rainy afternoon, her husband Marcus Harris had left home to buy a birthday cake for their then 9-year-old daughter. Diana still remembered the last smile Marcus gave as he waved goodbye to her and Jasmine, promising he'd be back quickly with Jasmine's favorite chocolate cake. But he never returned. A single, clinical phone call from the hospital changed Diana's life forever. A slick road had claimed Marcus instantly in a traffic accident. Diana remembered the world crumbling around her, each breath a struggle against unbearable pain. She had lost not only her husband but also her closest friend, the one who always encouraged her to pursue her passion for mechanics, despite society's insistence that it wasn't work for a woman. Marcus had been the only person who truly understood and supported her. He believed Diana's talent wasn't defined by degrees or gender, but by her fierce passion and skilled hands. When Marcus died, Diana didn't just grieve her life partner. She also feared the vast responsibility ahead, raising Jasmine alone in a world full of injustice and prejudice. From that day on, each day was an ongoing battle for Diana, to survive and to shield Jasmine from any further harm. She threw herself into work, repairing every kind of machine and engine she could find, laboring around the clock so Jasmine could attend school, eat well, stay warm, and have a stable life. Diana kept her pain hidden, determined never to let Jasmine glimpse her mother's vulnerability. But now, when her daughter was suffering the very injustices Diana had fought so hard to protect her from, the old pain returned more fiercely than ever. Diana knew Jasmine was deeply hurt, and she needed to be stronger than ever to help her daughter heal. As the first pale light of morning crept in, Diana slipped into Jasmine's room and sat quietly beside her bed. Jasmine still slept soundly, eyelashes fluttering in a restless, anxious dream. Diana gently brushed her daughter's hair back, her heart full of love, yet heavy with worry for the future. "I won't let anyone hurt you again," she whispered, her voice firm as a promise to herself and to her late husband. Jasmine stirred and opened her eyes, looking at her mother in surprise. "Mom, are you okay?" she asked softly, her voice still shaky with tears. Diana forced a gentle smile, though inside she felt both pain and anger tightening her chest. "I'm always okay, sweetie. Remember what Daddy used to tell me? He said we're stronger than people think. and no one can define us by their words. Jasmine sat up, rubbing her eyes, then leaned her head on Diana's shoulder. After a long moment, she spoke in a small but earnest voice. "I miss Daddy, Mom. I wish he were here right now." Diana's heart ached, but she kept her tone calm and strong. "Daddy is always with us, Jasmine, and he'd be so proud of how bravely we face our challenges. Trust me, we'll get through this." Jasmine nodded slightly, a flicker of hope and trust lighting her tear. Stained eyes. Diana wrapped her arms around her daughter in a tight hug, her determination swelling like never before. She knew this was no longer just a contest with Richard Williams. This was a fight for her honor, for Jasmine's future, and for every woman like her who fights quietly every day against a world full of prejudice. That day, after taking Jasmine to school and encouraging her to stand tall against the bullies, Diana returned to her modest workshop. Standing amid her well-worn tools, she studied the prototype engine that Richard and his team had abandoned. The challenge ahead would not be easy. It might even be impossible with her limited resources. But Diana understood this was her one chance to change how the world saw her. A detailed plan began to form in her mind. She knew she couldn't merely repair the engine. She had to uncover every subtle flaw, find the reason Richard's engineers had failed. There had to be a root cause they'd overlooked or deliberately ignored. Drawing on her years of hands, on experience, she was confident she'd spot something those Ivy League graduates had never even considered. Diana stepped to her workbench and began jotting down ideas and possible approaches in her little notebook. Her eyes shone with a fierce light, no longer dimmed by past pain. Marcus had taught her that failure wasn't the enemy. The real defeat was giving up before trying her hardest. And this time, Diana vowed, she would not give up. She would conquer this challenge, not only for herself or for Jasmine, but to prove to the world that human potential is never defined by a painful past or society's biases, but by the will and courage to rise above adversity. The late afternoon sun streamed gently through the small workshop window, casting a warm, golden glow across the wooden workbench. Diana sat there, surrounded by the complex components of the experimental engine, her eyes more focused and pensive than ever. After a long day spent examining every part, a strange intuition began to stir within her, an instinct she couldn't ignore. She picked up one of the components, a precision, engineered performance sensor, and studied it. Its tiny connector showed unusual wear, almost imperceptible unless you looked very closely. Diana frowned as her heart began to pound. This wasn't natural damage. Someone had deliberately tampered with the part in a way designed to trigger a failure that would be nearly impossible to detect. Her chest tightened as she moved on to a second critical piece, the electronic control chip. A hairline scratch marred its surface, seemingly accidental but positioned exactly where it could throw the entire system out of sync. Diana paused, her breath catching in her throat, the tension coiling through her body. She reached for the final part, the pressure-regulating valve. Sure enough, the valve had been sabotaged in the same subtle fashion. A tiny hole drilled in a nearly hidden spot, just large enough to destabilize the engine's pressure under operation. The three most vital components had all been expertly compromised. This was no routine defect or random malfunction. Someone at Precision Automotive wanted this project to fail, and had the skill to do it without even the top engineers noticing. A chill ran down Diana's spine. She slumped into her chair, her hardened hands shaking with a mix of anger and disbelief. Who could have done this? Who had both the motive and the ability to destroy the company's most important engine project from the inside? At that moment, Diana thought of someone she trusted to shed light on the situation. Samuel Brooks, a veteran engineer who had recently retired from Precision. Samuel had served as a senior advisor on many major projects, always respecting real talent and never underestimating anyone based on background or gender. She dialed his number immediately, and to her relief, he agreed to meet. Late that afternoon, Samuel Brooks appeared at the door of her small workshop. His face was lined with age, but his eyes still shone with sharp intellect. He stepped inside and smiled warmly when he saw Diana. "I've heard about the challenge you're facing," Samuel said in his deep, empathetic voice. "I know Richard. He's brilliant but arrogant. He believes this industry is for people exactly like him. But Diana, you're not just a victim of bias. You have real talent, and I hear you've uncovered something, haven't you?" Diana nodded and quickly walked him through her discoveries, the 3 deliberately sabotaged parts. Samuel listened intently, his expression growing graver, his eyes flashing with anger. When she finished, Samuel was silent for a moment. Then his tone turned cold. "You were very observant, Diana. I've seen this kind of sabotage before. Years ago, while I was still at Precision, I suspected there was an inside player undermining projects for personal gain. Projects led by female or minority engineers often failed in strangely consistent ways, and Richard always stood to benefit." Samuel paused, meeting Diana's eyes with solemn intensity. "I retired before I could gather enough proof, but it haunted me. Now it seems Richard has chosen you as his next victim." A shiver ran down Diana's spine as she realized the conspiracy was far bigger than she'd imagined. This wasn't just a personal test. It was a battle against an internal force determined to crush anyone who didn't fit their mold. Samuel placed a steady hand on her shoulder, his gaze firm with encouragement. "Diana, I know this is a heavy burden, but you must prevail, not only for yourself but for everyone. Richard and people like him have tried to destroy. Keep this to yourself. Repair the engine as you promised, but also gather evidence. I'll help you. Together, we'll unmask whoever is behind this sabotage." After Samuel left, Diana stood alone in the fading sunset. She felt the weight of her responsibility keenly. This was no longer a wager with Richard Williams. It was a fight for justice, for Jasmine, for Marcus, and for countless others. With fierce resolve, Diana began sketching her plan. She would rebuild the engine in secret while meticulously documenting every step of the sabotage. Then she would expose Richard in front of the entire company. She knew that, from this moment on, every move she made could lead to a triumphant victory or a devastating defeat. But Diana was ready. She was not fighting alone. Behind her stood Jasmine, Samuel, and the spirit of Marcus, urging her on with the promise that justice belongs to those brave enough to stand against wrong. While Diana quietly laid out her meticulous plan in her little workshop across town in Detroit, Richard Williams was still basking in his early triumph. He felt a surge of satisfaction as the mocking video of Diana spread like wildfire throughout the company, making him the center of attention. His pride bred complacency, causing him to lose the caution that had long served him well. On Wednesday afternoon, Richard accepted an invitation to appear on the popular radio show Detroit Today, a highly regarded talk program with a large local business audience. He planned to use the opportunity to flaunt his absolute confidence and to publicly put Diana in her place once and for all. When the red on-air light blinked on, the host, a middle-aged woman known for her warm, engaging voice, opened with a question. "Welcome back to Detroit Today. We're delighted to have Richard Williams, Chief Engineer at Precision Automotive, with us today. Richard, I understand you've issued quite an interesting challenge to a local mechanic." Richard flashed a self-satisfied smile and spoke clearly, his confidence unmistakable. "Thank you. Yes, recently we had a rather amusing incident at our company. A mechanic named Diana Harris, who doesn't hold a single engineering degree, claimed she could fix one of our experimental engines, something even our most seasoned engineers couldn't complete. I even made a joking offer. If she succeeded, I'd marry her on the spot and sign her to a $300,000 a year contract." He paused, then let out a mocking laugh that carried over the airwaves, underscoring his contempt for Diana. "You know, sometimes you have to help people recognize their real limits. I think Diana here is suffering from a serious case of delusion about her own abilities." Richard's arrogant tone and dismissive words carried far beyond what he could imagine. Unbeknownst to him, Dr. Angela Morrison, a renowned expert in industrial sabotage investigations, was driving home from the University of Michigan. Angela happened to switch on the radio and heard every word Richard said, her brow furrowed as she listened, her expression growing grave with each sentence. With her vast experience, she sensed immediately that something was very wrong. Richard's certainty of Diana's inevitable failure, tinged with arrogance, triggered in her a deep suspicion. Having advised the FBI and major corporations on sophisticated internal sabotage cases, Angela knew that such incidents are often disguised as natural technical failures, and the victims are typically those deemed unqualified. Her instincts propelled her to act swiftly. After a day spent gathering information and contact details, Angela Morrison showed up at Diana's small workshop the next afternoon. Diana was surprised to see the elderly woman with early silver hair and thick black, rimmed glasses, yet her eyes were sharp with intelligence and caution. "Sorry to drop by unannounced," Angela said gently but firmly. "I'm Dr. Angela Morrison, an industrial sabotage investigator. I heard what Richard Williams said about you on the radio, and I sensed something deeply amiss." Diana, though taken aback, immediately grasped the gravity of the situation. She invited Angela in and carefully walked her through every detail of her discovery, the 3 critical components that had been expertly sabotaged. She told Angela about her meeting with Samuel Brooks and her suspicions of a deep-seated plot within Precision Automotive to undermine her, and anyone like her. Angela listened intently, her concern growing by the minute. After a thoughtful pause, she looked Diana in the eye and said, "I'm convinced you're up against a serious case of internal sabotage. What you've uncovered matches exactly the methods I've seen before. Richard's engineering team is far too competent to overlook such precise tampering. This is no accident. It's the work of a well-organized group of skilled insiders." She paused again, her gaze unwavering. "I want to help you. Keep repairing that engine as though nothing has happened, and I'll assist you in gathering additional evidence. Together, we'll expose whoever is behind this sabotage once and for all." Diana felt a weight lift from her shoulders, knowing she was no longer alone in this fight. She shook Angela's hand, her eyes alight with renewed determination. "Thank you so much, Dr. Morrison. Together we'll get to the truth." After Angela left, Diana sat quietly in the workshop, realizing that Richard's arrogance and overconfidence were his greatest mistakes. His fatal flaw had led Angela to her door, giving Diana greater clarity about the battle she faced. Now, Diana was not only determined to prove her own ability, but also to unmask the dark conspiracy at Precision, restoring justice and honor not just for herself, but for everyone who had ever suffered the injustice and prejudice she had endured. As soon as Dr. Angela Morrison left the workshop, Diana stood by the window for a long moment, her thoughts racing over everything they'd just discussed. She knew that every move she made from here on out would have to be extremely careful. It was in that very moment that her phone on the workbench started buzzing incessantly with messages from Jasmine, her daughter's voice trembling with urgency. "Mom, they're doing something awful on social media. You need to see this right now." Diana's heart clenched as she snatched up the phone. Her screen filled with notifications from Precision Automotive's internal social feeds. Richard Williams had gone a step further. He'd created a new chat group mockingly titled "Tracking the Miracle of the Lady Mechanic," with dozens of employees added. Poisonous remarks and ridiculing images flooded her screen, and Diana felt her throat tighten with rage. In the group chat, Richard regularly posted nasty jabs, using his power and influence to stoke the jeering. One of his most recent taunts read, "Let's see how this miracle plays out in Diana's shabby little shop. Anyone want to bet on when she'll finally wave the white flag?" Others who orbited Richard piled on. Jake Silva, Richard's loyal assistant, chimed in with a sneer. "I think the only miracle we'll see is her figuring out how to turn on a computer without a tutorial." Sandra from HR couldn't resist. "Maybe she's busy learning blueprint reading on YouTube, but I'm betting it'll take her the rest of her life." Each cruel message cut into Diana's pride like a blade, but she knew that if she reacted, she'd play right into Richard's hands. She inhaled deeply, forcing herself to stay calm, reminding herself that her greatest revenge would be strategic silence followed by decisive action. Jasmine stepped into the workshop, her eyes red, clutching her laptop. Her voice was soft but unwavering. "Mom, we can't just stand by and watch this. We need to document everything they're doing before they delete the evidence." Looking into her daughter's determined gaze, Diana realized how much Jasmine had grown. Perhaps faster than she'd ever imagined. She offered a small, grateful smile at the strength her daughter clearly inherited from her father. "You're right, Jasmine," Diana said, her tone steady and clear. "We'll quietly collect every bit of proof, every comment, every video. When the time comes, this will be our greatest weapon." With Jasmine's help, Diana went through each message, image, and clip posted by Richard's group. Jasmine saved everything into a secure, hidden folder, carefully organizing the insults and mockery into an irrefutable record. Every cruel line, every humiliating video now became sharp evidence, waiting for the moment to expose the bigotry and malice of Richard and his accomplices. Meanwhile, in his upscale office on Precision's top floor, Richard leaned back in his leather chair, smugly monitoring the group's engagement. He was certain Diana wouldn't withstand this public ridicule for long. He expected her to crumble in humiliation. "Jake," he said to his assistant with a self-satisfied grin, "I bet she'll be begging to quit in 3 days. A person like Diana can't handle this kind of pressure." Jake laughed in agreement, his tone flattering. "You're a genius, Richard. No one can resist your masterful psychological tactics." But Richard was gravely miscalculating Diana's resolve. Instead of succumbing, his campaign of humiliation only fueled her determination. She knew she had no choice but to fight back. This wasn't just about personal pride anymore. It was a battle against a deeply ingrained system of prejudice at Precision Automotive. Night after night, Diana and Jasmine spent hours scrutinizing, annotating, and cataloging every scrap of evidence, preparing for the decisive counterstrike. Diana understood that Richard's arrogance was his greatest vulnerability, and it was the opening she would seize to win. One evening, after they'd amassed a complete dossier, Diana sat silently at her desk, a fierce resolve swelling in her chest. Jasmine came over, placing a hand on her mother's shoulder, and asked quietly, "Mom, Do you really think we can win this fight?" Diana met her daughter's gaze with absolute conviction. "I don't just think it, Jasmine, I know it. They made a huge mistake underestimating us, and I will make them pay for every wrong they've done." Her voice rang with unwavering determination. For the first time in days of tension, Jasmine allowed herself a relieved smile. Mother and daughter exchanged a look of unspoken understanding. Ahead lay a hard fight, but it was their chance to reclaim the justice and dignity they deserved. Outside the workshop window, night had fully fallen. Yet, in Diana and Jasmine's hearts, the light of justice was burning brighter than ever, illuminating the path they were determined to follow through to the end. The ever-growing trove of evidence that Diana and Jasmine had been secretly compiling gave Diana a measure of confidence. Yet she knew that mocking videos and chat messages alone wouldn't be enough to defeat Richard and the conspiracy he'd orchestrated. It was at that moment her phone rang with an unexpected call from Dr. Angela Morrison. Angela's serious, urgent voice came clear over the line. "Diana, I've analyzed your case in more depth. We need to meet immediately." A few hours later, Angela arrived at Diana's tiny workshop. In the seasoned expert's eyes, Diana saw both fierce determination and razor-sharp focus. Angela carried a bag filled with technical equipment and carefully prepared research documents. Without hesitation, she got straight to the point. "I've spent days examining the components you provided," Angela said, spreading detailed technical reports across Diana's workbench. Her expression was grave. Each word weighed heavily. "The 3 parts you found were indeed tampered with in a highly sophisticated way, clearly intended to sabotage the entire engine system. This isn't random mechanical failure. It's deliberate industrial sabotage, carried out by someone with expert knowledge of precision automotive's technology." Diana felt each of Angela's words illuminate the suspicions she'd harbored all along. But what came next shook her more than anything. "Even more important," Angela lowered her voice and fixed Diana with an intense stare, "this isn't the first case of sabotage at Precision. I've covertly researched the company's history of failed projects, and the results shocked me." Angela pushed a thick dossier toward Diana. Her eyes glimmered with both sorrow and anger. "In the past 5 years, at least 8 major projects at Precision failed due to technical issues. Strangely, every one of those projects was headed by either female engineers or black engineers. None of the white male-led projects ever failed. Moreover, after each failure, Richard and his team directly benefited. Promotions, raises, and control over the next critical projects." A chill ran through Diana's body as fury ignited within her. She looked at the documents before her. Each page was clear proof of the despicable plot Richard and his cronies had carried out relentlessly for years. "Do you understand what this means, Diana?" Angela asked softly but firmly. "Richard isn't merely trying to humiliate you. He's preserving a covert system of discrimination at Precision. You're the latest target, but not the last, unless we stop this now." Diana was silent for a long moment, her mind reeling from these horrifying revelations. She had thought her fight was about her own honor and Jasmine's safety. Now she realized her responsibility went far beyond that. This was a battle against systemic injustice. A fight for justice not only for herself, but for the many colleagues Richard had crushed under his authority. Diana drew a deep breath and finally spoke, her voice steadier than ever. "Angela, I know this won't be easy, but I won't back down. We must do everything in our power to bring this truth to light and restore justice for all of Richard's victims." Angela offered a small, encouraging smile, her eyes shining with conviction. I've been waiting for someone brave enough to stand up like you, Diana. This will be a tough fight, but I'm certain we will win if we stay united and unwavering." As Angela rose to leave, she paused at the door, looking back at Diana with a powerful final reminder. "Don't forget, Diana. Richard's arrogance and contempt for others are his greatest weaknesses. He's confident you can't perform a miracle. But we'll prove that real miracles come from the power of truth and courage." After Angela departed, Diana stood silently in the workshop, absorbing every word she'd heard. She glanced up at the small photo of Marcus and Jasmine on the wall, imagining her late husband's gaze encouraging her in this monumental struggle. Diana knew that, from this moment on, she was fighting for more than just herself or her little family. This was a fight for everyone who had ever been oppressed, denied their rightful opportunities, and cast aside by those in power. She stepped to her workbench and gathered the documents and evidence Angela had provided. A fierce determination lit her eyes. Fear and hesitation were gone. Diana Harris realized she was no longer simply a woman facing prejudice and mockery. She held the chance to expose an unjust system and bring justice to those long forgotten. From this moment forward, Diana understood that this battle was not just about defeating Richard. It was her opportunity to change the game forever. The days following that fateful meeting with Angela passed in a suffocating silence. Diana knew that even the slightest misstep could bring their entire plan crashing down. Beneath her calm exterior, she was spending hours towing the line between brilliance and risk. Long, sleepless nights during which she and Angela quietly reviewed every secret document, gathering and compiling the smallest pieces of evidence about the sabotage at Precision Automotive. While Diana and Angela worked in secret, Richard continued to advance his mocking campaign with brazen arrogance. Every morning, he posted new taunts in the internal chat group, insisting Diana's defeat was inevitable. He even created and circulated a series of insulting memes that spread rapidly throughout the company, provoking scoffs and derision from his colleagues. Richard was convinced Diana would crumble under the enormous psychological pressure he'd manufactured. To him, victory was already in hand. It was merely a matter of time. But his hubris blinded him to the gathering storm behind his back. Diana and Angela met regularly at a quiet cafe on the city's outskirts to avoid suspicion. Their table was covered with folders, photographs, and pages detailing previous acts of sabotage. With vital support from Samuel Brooks, Precision's former chief engineer before Richard took over, they began to piece together the critical links in the conspiracy. Samuel, with his deep understanding of Precision's internal workings, had provided them with a hefty dossier of internal reports that had been carefully hidden. These documents chronicled suspicious failures in 8 major projects over the past 5 years, all led by female or black engineers. Notably, no projects helmed by white male engineers had ever failed. Moreover, after each failure, Richard and his inner circle profited directly. Promotions, raises, and new leadership posts on the company's most important projects. Samuel regarded Diana solemnly, his voice low and measured. All these failed projects follow the same pattern. A crucial component is damaged with a surgical precision, and the technical errors are staged so they can't be detected immediately. And the only person consistently present on these projects before they fell apart is Richard and his trusted engineering team. Angela picked up the thread, her eyes sharp and unwavering. "That matches my technical analysis perfectly. These aren't random malfunctions. They're deliberate acts by people who know this technology inside and out." Diana held the classified dossier in her hands, her fingers trembling from emotion and tension. It felt as if she were clutching not just her own future, but the future of all those who had been harmed. She looked at Samuel and Angela, her voice more determined than ever. With this evidence, we will not only bring Richard down, but expose the corrupt system that's been in place for years. But we must be extremely careful. One tiny error could derail the entire plan. In the days that followed, Diana and Angela worked tirelessly in secrecy. They meticulously analyzed each piece of data, photographed and scanned documents, and made multiple copies to ensure no one could destroy the evidence. Jasmine also pitched in, digitally cataloging the documents, videos, and Richard's taunting messages. Though still so young, her maturity and sense of responsibility made Diana immensely proud. Meanwhile, Richard continued to enjoy life at Precision, hosting small celebratory gatherings with his closest engineers to toast Diana's inevitable defeat. He had no idea that every mocking word and self-satisfied gesture was being carefully recorded and would soon be used as the sharpest ammunition in the plan to unmask him. One late evening, in the cramped room piled high with documents and evidence, Diana slumped back in her chair, staring into the distance. Angela sat across from her, taking a sip of coffee before speaking gently, "Diana, I know this is an incredibly tense stage, but you must stay calm. Richard is making a grave mistake by being so overconfident. When we present our evidence to the company and the media, he will be utterly undone." Diana nodded slightly, her eyes shining with unbreakable resolve. "I won't let my emotions ruin the plan. I just keep thinking Marcus would be so proud to see us fighting the right fight." Angela gave her a warm, understanding look. "He would be proud of you, Diana. And I'm convinced that when this is all over, not only Jasmine but countless others will be grateful for your courage." Outside the window, darkness had swallowed Detroit. Yet inside Diana's heart, a blazing flame of justice, truth, and unwavering resolve burned ever brighter. She knew that in just a few days' time, a storm Richard never saw coming would sweep away his arrogance and power and return justice to people like her and Jasmine, who had endured prejudice and injustice in silence for far too long. The night sky over Detroit held no stars. Darkness pressed down like a great velvet curtain, still and mysterious. In her familiar workshop, Diana worked tirelessly at her bench, beads of sweat glistening on her brow under the soft yellow light. In just a few hours, she would take the stage before the entire company. A moment that would forever change her and Jasmine's lives. On the worn wooden table sat the experimental engine, nearly fully reassembled, each component fitted with meticulous precision. Every motion Diana made showcased her expert skill and deep understanding. This was more than simply fixing a machine. It was living proof of what a woman once dismissed could truly achieve. Diana paused for a moment, her eyes on the thick dossier beside the engine. It held every piece of clear, detailed evidence she, Angela, and Samuel had painstakingly gathered over the past days. Each page, photograph, and technical analysis laid bare the cunning sabotage Richard and his inner circle had carried out for years. A small sound behind her made Diana start. She turned to see Jasmine standing in the doorway, her young face full of worry. Jasmine stepped forward, voice trembling. "Mom, are you sure you want to do this? I'm scared. What if it doesn't go the way you've planned? We could lose everything." Diana looked at her daughter for a long moment, a wave of fierce emotion rising in her chest. She crossed the room and wrapped Jasmine in a hug, feeling every anxious breath her daughter took. After a moment, she spoke, her voice gentle yet strong. "Jasmine, I know you're worried. I've been scared too, facing what's ahead. But do you remember what Daddy used to say?" Jasmine nodded, eyes wide. Diana smiled, looking into her daughter's eyes. He used to say, "Justice never comes from avoiding a challenge or suffering in silence. Justice comes when we stand up, face it head on, and fight for what's right." Her voice caught with resolve. "I know exactly what we're up against. But if I back down today, I'll have failed to protect you, and everyone else who's faced the same injustice. Do you understand, Jasmine? This isn't just my fight. It's a fight to reclaim fairness for everyone." Jasmine looked up at her mother, her eyes shining with understanding. She gripped Diana's hand and nodded firmly. "I get it, Mom. I'm so proud of you. I'll always stand by you." Diana let out a relieved smile and hugged her daughter tight. Jasmine's support was her greatest strength. Then Diana turned back to the bench and finished the final adjustments on the engine, feeling steadier than ever. Meanwhile, in a small apartment near downtown, Angela and Samuel were carefully prepping professional recording equipment. Angela checked each compact camera, ensuring batteries were full and tests were complete. Samuel reviewed every detail of the recording plan, making sure no move by Richard or his accomplices would escape the lens. Angela looked at Samuel, her eyes serious yet sparkling with excitement. "Tomorrow will be the most important day of Diana's life. We have only one chance to reveal the truth to the entire company. Are you ready, Samuel?" Samuel nodded decisively, his eyes bright with conviction. "I've waited for this day for so long, Angela. Living with these secrets day after day has been unbearable. Finally, we can bring everything into the light." Angela gently placed her hand on his shoulder, her voice full of empathy. "I know how hard this is for you, Samuel, but trust me. After tomorrow, all our sacrifices and waiting will have been worth it." Samuel smiled gratefully at her. "I know. Diana will do it. She's stronger than anyone ever imagined." That night, none of them slept. Angela and Samuel ran through the recording plan one last time, while Diana performed her final engine checks and reviewed the evidence dossier for the 100th time. Outside the workshop window, the first pale rays of dawn began to appear, illuminating Diana's tired but determined face. She rose, looking at the completed engine and the pile of documents before her. Everything was ready for the decisive moment. She took a deep breath, silently declaring that today would be the day justice was delivered, the day she and her brave allies would shatter the thick fog of lies and injustice, restoring the bright clarity of truth for all. For Diana knew that no matter how fierce the storm ahead, she held the power of truth in her hands, and that was the sharpest weapon no authority could withstand. The first rays of dawn had barely lit up Detroit's sky, marking the moment Diana had waited for so many days. The air inside Precision Automotive's grand auditorium was thick with tension. Every employee was present, their eyes a mix of curiosity and skepticism fixed on the podium at the center of the room, where Diana's fate, and perhaps the company's, would be decided. Standing proudly at center stage, Richard Williams exuded excessive confidence that grated on many. His impeccably tailored suit, perfectly groomed hair, and the phone in his hand streaming live video were the final touches in his long, planned campaign to publicly humiliate Diana. Richard smiled, scanning the crowd with deliberate ease as his voice rang out clearly. "Thank you all for being here today. As you know, a few days ago I issued a special challenge to Ms. Diana Harris, who has always claimed to be a mechanical genius. Honestly, I'm excited to see what miracle she might pull off today." A ripple of laughter rose from Richard's inner circle, each chuckle a sharp barb meant to pierce Diana's pride. He basked in their attention, smirking as if awaiting a comedic spectacle. The auditorium doors slowly opened, and an uncanny hush fell. Diana stepped in, calm and resolute, not a trace of fear on her face. She walked steadily toward the podium, her gaze unwavering. Behind her, Angela and Samuel had discreetly taken up prime positions, their small cameras poised to capture every crucial moment. With a mocking sneer, Richard watched her composure, though impatience and doubt flickered behind his confidence. He moved closer, deliberately standing right beside her, voice dripping with sarcasm. "Well, Diana, I must admire your courage. Show us the magic you've used to fix an engine our best engineers couldn't even touch." Diana met his gaze without a word, her eyes so fierce they unsettled Richard's smirk. After a pregnant pause, she calmly opened her document briefcase and withdrew a hefty dossier, the detailed report she, Angela, and Samuel had compiled over countless late nights. In a steady, confident tone, Diana began, "Before I demonstrate that the engine is fully repaired, I believe everyone here should know the truth behind why this project originally failed." Richard frowned, momentarily thrown, but quickly masked it with a derisive laugh. "And what truth is that, Diana? Are you accusing someone else of your own incompetence?" Unfazed, Diana pressed on clearly and decisively. "Upon thorough inspection, I discovered that 3 critical engine components were deliberately sabotaged. I have documented every technical detail, and I'm prepared to present this evidence to company leadership and our clients right now." Murmurs rippled through the room as skepticism and shock turned toward Richard. His smug expression faded. He stammered to regain control. "This is absurd. You can't prove such accusations. This is clearly a distraction from your own inadequacy." Angela gave Samuel a subtle signal to begin recording. Every gesture, every expression on Richard's face was captured with crystal clarity. Diana's voice rang out, cutting through the growing buzz. "I'm not speaking without proof. I have the evidence. And now, before I start up the engine I've successfully repaired, I invite everyone to examine it themselves." She projected clear images of the 3 sabotaged parts onto the large screen, photographs and technical analyses so unmistakable they could not be denied. The auditorium erupted, eyes widening in disbelief and outrage, many now staring accusingly at Richard and his team. Richard felt the floor shift beneath him. He attempted to interject but sounded shaky and uncertain. This is clearly a misunderstanding or malicious slander. Diana, you have no right to accuse anyone without grounds." Stepping forward, Angela's authoritative voice resonated. "I am Dr. Angela Morrison, an expert in industrial sabotage. I have thoroughly verified every technical detail Ms. Harris has provided. This is a case of intentional industrial sabotage, and I stand ready to cooperate with the authorities for a full investigation." Richard's face drained of color, his confidence shattered by panic and stress. The room teetered on chaos, stunned by the irrefutable evidence Diana had just revealed. Amid the tumult, Diana stood firm, her eyes shining with unwavering conviction. This intense showdown was only beginning, but she had already succeeded in shaking the very foundation of Richard's power, opening the door to the justice she and her allies had fought so long to achieve. From that moment on, everyone in the auditorium understood the game had changed. Richard no longer controlled the narrative. Power was shifting to Diana, the woman who had quietly prepared to bring the truth into the light. A tense hush fell over the vast auditorium as every eye turned to Diana, standing firm before the restless crowd. She calmly stepped beside the engine, methodically inspecting each component with assured confidence. So composed it seemed almost surreal to the onlookers. Richard stood frozen, his face ashen and sweat beading on his brow. The arrogant confidence he'd worn just moments before had vanished, replaced by sheer panic. He muttered to himself, trying to convince himself, "She can't have fixed it. It's impossible." But unlike Richard, Diana acted decisively. With one deliberate motion, she pressed the engine's start button. The room held its breath. At the first gentle roar of the engine, smooth and precise, every mechanism engaged perfectly, its performance surpassing even the original engineer's expectations. The auditorium fell into absolute silence, save for the steady hum of the engine, a clear testament to Diana's extraordinary skill. Colleagues and important clients exchanged looks of astonishment and admiration, sending Richard into deeper shock. He staggered back, eyes wide in disbelief, as the nightmare he never imagined unfolded before him. In that moment, Dr. Angela Morrison emerged from the crowd, clutching the thick dossier of reports, images, and concrete evidence. She approached Diana, then addressed the audience with authoritative clarity. "I want everyone here to understand. This isn't merely a technical achievement. It's the most definitive proof of a years-long industrial sabotage ring operating within precision automotive." Angela swiftly displayed each piece of evidence on the large screen. Every photograph, every technical analysis, every video clip was unmistakably clear and utterly convincing, directly implicating Richard and his inner circle. She continued in a measured, serious tone. "Through our investigation, we have confirmed that critical components were sabotaged by individuals with intimate knowledge of this engine's design. These acts of sabotage have targeted female and black engineers on multiple occasions, all intended to undermine them and enrich Richard and his associates." The auditorium erupted in stunned outrage at these revelations. All eyes turned accusingly toward Richard, who now stood utterly undone, his face pale and defeated. Tension spiked further when Samuel Brooks, who had silently watched from the side, stepped forward, holding another secret dossier. His expression was grave yet resolute. His voice rang out, firm and uncompromising. "What Dr. Morrison has presented is completely accurate. I possess internal reports I've safeguarded for years. Documents proving that every time a project was sabotaged, Richard and his loyal engineers were the direct beneficiaries, earning promotions, raises, and greater power within the company." As Samuel projected the documents, each naming Richard and his co-conspirators alongside internal memos detailing each act of sabotage, the crowd buzzed with anger. No one doubted the shocking truth any longer. Richard, broken, stumbled back and sank into a chair, his gaze falling in shame. He managed a weak protest. "This is all slander. I had nothing to do with it." But now no one believed him. The evidence was overwhelming. Former supporters turned away, disappointment and indignation etched on their faces. In that pivotal moment, Diana stepped forward, her voice strong and heartfelt. "I'm not here merely to prove my own skill. I'm here for justice. I refuse to accept a system that lets manipulators like Richard exploit prejudice to harm innocent people. Today, I hope you all see the truth and recognize what must change in this company." Her words reverberated through the hall, awakening the conscience and pride of every listener. Many nodded in agreement, even erupting into applause, embracing her powerful message. Richard slumped in defeat, head bowed, stripped of the power and status he'd once taken for granted, undone by his own arrogance and greed. Amid the cheers and uproar, Diana stood tall, her gaze unwavering. Angela placed a hand gently on her shoulder, pride shining in her eyes, and Samuel nodded in approval. They all understood this was the decisive moment, the moment their sacrifice, courage, and hard work were vindicated. It wasn't just Diana's victory. It was a triumph for justice, truth, and everyone who had ever been marginalized and harmed by prejudice. A sudden hush fell over the auditorium after Diana's resolute words. Richard, once at the pinnacle of power, now looked like a pale shadow of himself, eyes vacant, muttering feeble excuses he scarcely believed. "It's all a misunderstanding. I would never do this." But his weak protest was drowned by the rising tide of anger and disappointment from the crowd. Employees who had long stood silent under Richard's authority now voiced their scorn and outright rejection. No one doubted the crystal. Clear evidence Angela and Samuel had presented, sharp as a blade, cutting off any defense Richard or his accomplices might offer. At the back of the hall, the grand doors swung open. Thomas Crawford, the gray-haired CEO who rarely appeared before all staff, entered with a stern, commanding presence. Every eye turned to him as silence fell again. Crawford's disappointment was palpable as he strode directly to Richard. His voice was cold and grave, each word an arrow to Richard's conscience. "I entrusted you, Richard. I gave you the company's most critical responsibilities, and you betrayed that trust by sabotaging the very business you were meant to protect. What you've done is not only a breach of professional ethics, it's a criminal act." Richard wavered, trying to stand tall as he summoned his last reserves of defiance. "Mr. Crawford, this is a conspiracy of slander. I'm innocent." Crawford cut him off with blazing eyes. "That's enough, Richard. The evidence is undeniable, and I will not allow you to tarnish this company's reputation any longer. Effective immediately, you, Jake Silva, and anyone else implicated are dismissed. Prepare to face the legal consequences of your actions." Richard collapsed under the weight of Crawford's declaration. Jake Silva, pale and silent, bowed his head in grim acceptance. Everything Richard once held, his ambitions, his power, dissolved like smoke, replaced by the heavy shadow of disgrace. Amid the stunned chaos, Crawford turned to Diana, his stern gaze softening into genuine gratitude. "Ms. Diana Harris, on behalf of Precision Automotive, I owe you a profound apology and our deepest thanks. Not only have you saved a pivotal project, but you've shown the courage and determination to bring the truth to light. From now on, no one here will suffer the injustice you endured." A roar of applause erupted, from colleagues and key clients alike. For the first time after so much stress, Diana allowed herself a gentle smile, her heart full of emotion and gratitude. Yet, in that instant, Richard, still unwilling to accept total defeat, snapped out one last spiteful challenge. "I remember my original challenge. Fix the engine, and I'd marry you right here. Well, Diana, you won't turn down such a generous offer, will you?" The room fell utterly silent, stunned by his final, shameless gambit. But Diana, standing tall and resolute, met Richard's gaze calmly and delivered her reply with polite firmness, every word resonant. "Richard, I've proven exactly what needed proving, but I would never demean my dignity by accepting a proposal rooted in insult and disrespect. Myself, respect matters far more than any contract or offer you could ever make. Perhaps that's the greatest lesson you need to learn today." Her words echoed through the hall, met with a thunderous ovation. Richard, stripped of even the last shred of honor, bowed his head under the weight of contempt smoking from every corner of the room. From the back, Angela and Samuel stepped forward, pride shining on their faces. They knew this moment was the just reward for all their quiet perseverance and courage. They flanked Diana, a living testament that justice belongs to those brave enough to stand up and fight. As Richard and Jake Silva were escorted out by security, A palpable relief settled over everyone. Diana watched them go without bitterness, only a serene confidence born of victory for truth and justice. She knew this fight was never just for herself. It was for Jasmine, for Marcus, for Angela and Samuel, and for all who'd suffered under injustice. In that powerful moment, Diana understood that the greatest triumph isn't vanquishing another. It's affirming one's own worth and dignity, and sending the strongest possible message about fairness, courage, and the true meaning of justice. That afternoon, as the pale golden sunlight bathed the sprawling Precision Automotive campus, Diana stood quietly by the window of her new office, her gaze distant as she lost herself in thought. The room was spacious and bright, so different from the cramped little workshop she once knew, but Diana's core values remained unchanged: honesty, courage, and dignity. After Richard's scandal was exposed, Thomas Crawford didn't hesitate to appoint Diana Harris as Director of Technology Innovation. This newly created division had a clear mission: to drive creativity and advance gender and racial equity at Precision Automotive. Diana, once a black female mechanic who'd been dismissed and derided, was now a passionate leader committed to meaningful, lasting change. Over the following weeks, Diana and Dr. Angela Morrison set out to overhaul company culture. Angela, veteran expert and ardent advocate, joined as senior advisor, partnering with Diana to craft new hiring policies that prioritized women and engineers of color. Together, these two brave women built a culture where every individual was evaluated on talent, ethics, and dedication, regardless of background or skin color. Meanwhile, Diana's inspiring story spread far beyond Detroit, becoming a national symbol against discrimination. Universities and civic organizations invited her to speak, sharing her journey and rallying others to fight for fairness and human dignity. One morning, she received a special call from Detroit Today, the very radio show where Richard had once mocked her so arrogantly. This time, Diana appeared as a victor, humble yet heartfelt. In the studio, her warm, measured voice carried strength. The best revenge is never to destroy others. For me, the most powerful retaliation is to build something positive, to change society's misguided prejudices, and to inspire those around us. Her words resonated instantly, touching the hearts of millions. From a woman once humiliated and dismissed, Diana had become a living emblem of resilience, justice, and the power of dignity. Diana's daughter, Jasmine Harris, embarked on her own remarkable path. Encouraged by her mother's example, Jasmine won a full scholarship to the University of Michigan to study mechanical engineering. She became a role model for her generation, frequently speaking at schools to encourage young people to overcome stereotypes and confidently pursue their dreams. As for Richard Williams, the man who once wielded power and manipulated others, he now found himself utterly isolated. In the aftermath of the scandal, he and Jake Silva faced serious criminal charges for industrial sabotage and organized discrimination. Every career door slammed shut. No company would risk hiring a figure so thoroughly disgraced. Richard came to understand that his arrogance and illicit ambition had cornered him, leaving no escape from public condemnation and legal retribution. Under Diana's leadership, Precision Automotive experienced a powerful wave of innovation. Women and engineers of color gradually rose to leadership roles that matched their abilities. Those once pushed to the margins found real respect and opportunity. New projects not only showcased cutting-edge technical breakthroughs but also embodied a spirit of equity and diversity, the very values Diana and Angela had championed. One snowy late year afternoon, Diana and Jasmine stood together by the large office window, watching silent flakes drift down over the city. Jasmine slipped her hand into her mother's, eyes bright with pride. "Mom, I know Dad must be smiling somewhere up there, seeing all you've accomplished. I'm so proud of you." Diana hugged her daughter gently, her heart full of gratitude and peace. She knew Marcus's spirit lived on in both of them, a constant reminder of the importance of justice and courage. She turned to Angela, her most trusted partner on this journey, and said sincerely, "We still have so much to do, Angela. But today I feel truly happy knowing the road ahead will be brighter, not just for us, but for many others." Angela smiled and nodded, her eyes shining with determination. "We'll keep working to make things better, Diana. This is only the beginning." And, as Angela said, it truly was just the beginning. A beginning filled with hope and optimism, not only for Precision Automotive but for the wider community and society at large. Diana's story, from a dismissed female mechanic to an extraordinary leader, continued to inspire, proving once and for all that talent, integrity, and dignity are what truly define a person, far beyond any barrier of race or gender. Diana Harris's journey was not only a testament to overcoming prejudice and injustice, but a living demonstration of the extraordinary power of dignity and courage. Through her story, we see that regardless of background, skin color, or gender, it is character and ethics that reveal our true worth. What do you think of Diana's choices and actions? Would you have the courage to fight for justice as she did? Share your thoughts in the comments below. If you found this story meaningful and inspiring, please like and share to spread its positive message. And don't forget to subscribe so you won't miss more uplifting tales of bravery, fairness, and life's greatest lessons. Thank you, and see you in the next story.